Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those who are supposed to be on your side. My name is Nathan, and for 5 years, I've been just another face at Horizon Innovations, working overtime, skipping lunch breaks, and pouring my heart into projects that other people would take credit for. All while being overlooked, underappreciated, and worst of all, invisible. Hey Nathan, can you handle the guest list for the quarterly review meeting? My manager, Vanessa, didn't even look up from her phone as she passed by my desk. It wasn't a request. It never was. I felt that familiar knot form in my stomach, the one that appears whenever I'm handed yet another administrative task far below my qualifications. With a master's degree in business strategy and 3 successful project implementations that saved the company millions, I was still being treated like an intern. Sure thing, Vanessa, I replied, with a practiced smile that never reached my eyes. The quarterly review was our biggest company event, where department heads, board members, and top executives gathered to discuss performance metrics and future strategies. Everyone who mattered would be there. Everyone except me, apparently. I was just the doorman, the name checker, the coffee fetcher. As I walked back to my cubicle, I could hear the excited chatter from the conference room where my team was preparing their presentations. My presentation, the one I had stayed up for 3 nights straight to perfect, was now being rehearsed by Derek, my coworker, who had been with the company for just 8 months. Nathan, we need someone with more presence to deliver this. You understand, right? Vanessa had said 2 days ago, patting my shoulder like I was a child who needed consoling after losing a game of tag. I sat down at my desk, pulling up the guest list on my computer. 78 names. 78 people more important than me. The morning of the quarterly review arrived, and I stood at the entrance of our company's largest conference room, clipboard in hand, wearing my best suit, the one I had splurged on months ago in hopes of finally being invited to present my ideas. Instead, I was checking names off a list. Good morning, Mr. Daniels, I greeted our chief marketing officer with a professional nod. Morning, he replied, pausing to squint at my name tag. Norman. It's Nathan, sir. But he was already inside, mingling with the others who mattered. One by one, they arrived. Executives in tailored suits, board members with confident handshakes, department heads with folders of impressive metrics. And one by one, they breezed past me, barely acknowledging my existence. Wow, full house today, huh? Said a voice beside me. I turned to see Ellie from HR, one of the few people who actually knew my name and occasionally invited me to lunch. Yep, all the important people in one room, I replied, unable to hide the bitterness in my tone. Ellie gave me a sympathetic look. You should be in there presenting, Nathan. That project restructuring was your brainchild. I shrugged. Apparently I lack executive presence, I said, mimicking Vanessa's condescending tone. The last few guests trickled in, and I was about to close the doors when I noticed a man walking hurriedly down the hallway. He wasn't on my list, but something about his confident stride made me hesitate before stopping him. Excuse me, sir, are you here for the quarterly review? He stopped, looked at me with piercing blue eyes and smiled. Yes, I am. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare. I scanned my list again. I'm sorry, but I don't see your name here. May I ask who you are? The man's smile widened. James Sullivan. My heart nearly stopped. James Sullivan was the new CEO, the one who had been appointed just 3 weeks ago and was scheduled to make his first appearance at our office today. And I, in my infinite wisdom, was questioning his right to enter the meeting. Mr. Sullivan, I'm so sorry, sir. Of course, please go right in. I stepped aside, feeling my face burn with embarrassment. But instead of walking past me like everyone else had, he extended his hand. And you are? Surprised, I shook his hand. Nathan Thompson, sir. Nice to meet you, Nathan. What department are you with? Business strategy, sir. I've been here for 5 years. He nodded thoughtfully. Business strategy? Then why are you out here checking names instead of in there strategizing? I didn't have a good answer. At least not one that wouldn't sound like complaining. Just helping out where needed, sir. James Sullivan studied me for a moment, then glanced at the clipboard in my hand. Is that the attendance list? Yes, sir. May I see it? I handed him the clipboard, confused but compliant. He scanned the list quickly, then looked back at me. Follow me, Nathan. Before I could respond, he was walking into the conference room, and I found myself trailing behind him like a lost puppy. The room fell silent as everyone noticed the CEO's arrival. Vanessa's eyes widened when she saw me entering behind him. What's he doing here? I heard her whisper to Derek, not quietly enough. James Sullivan took his place at the head of the conference table, gesturing for me to stand beside him. I did, feeling 78 pairs of eyes burning into me with confusion and curiosity. Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm James Sullivan, your new CEO. Before we dive into the quarterly numbers, I'd like to take a moment to address something I've noticed during my first weeks reviewing this company's operations. The room was so quiet, you could hear the air conditioning hum. I've spent the last 3 weeks reviewing not just our financial performance, but our people. I've read every project report, every implementation plan, and every suggestion submitted in the last year. My heart began to race. The strategic implementation plan, my plan, had been submitted just 2 months ago. And what I found, he continued, was that some of our most innovative ideas were coming from people who weren't getting the recognition they deserved. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Like Nathan here. Suddenly, the room felt too small, too hot. Every eye was now fixed on me with a new intensity. What happened next would change everything. But in that moment, suspended between years of invisibility and what was about to come, I realized that sometimes being overlooked isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's just the beginning. James Sullivan's hand remained firm on my shoulder as he looked around the room, his gaze landing on each executive's face. The tension was palpable. In 5 years at Horizon Innovations, I had never seen the conference room this silent. I came across a strategic implementation plan that caught my attention, the CEO continued, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room. It proposed a complete restructuring of our client acquisition approach, a bold strategy that, by my calculations, could increase our market penetration by 34% within 18 months. My throat went dry. He was talking about my plan, the one Vanessa had dismissed as too ambitious and unrealistic, the one she had filed away without a second thought. When I asked who was behind this brilliant piece of work, Sullivan said, I was surprised to learn that the author wasn't sitting at this table today. Across the room, Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Derek, who had been preparing to present his ideas, my ideas, suddenly became intensely interested in reorganizing his notes. Instead, Sullivan continued, I found him standing outside checking names off a list. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. I could feel the weight of everyone's stares, some confused, some curious, and some, like Vanessa's, filled with dawning horror. Nathan Thompson has been with Horizon Innovations for 5 years, Sullivan announced. In that time, he's developed 3 major efficiency protocols that have saved this company an estimated $4.2 million. He's authored 5 strategic proposals, each more innovative than the last. And yet somehow, he's never been invited to present at these meetings. My heart hammered against my ribs. How did he know all this? I had always assumed my work disappeared into the corporate void, never to be seen or acknowledged. But James Sullivan, a man who had only been CEO for 3 weeks, had not only seen it, but recognized its value. Sir? Vanessa interjected, her voice honeyed with artificial confidence. Nathan is a valuable team member, but he's still developing his leadership skills. We've been mentoring him. Sullivan raised his hand, silencing her mid-sentence. Ms. Reynolds, I've reviewed the performance evaluations for the past 3 years. Mr. Thompson has consistently exceeded expectations in every category, including leadership potential. Yet his position and compensation have remained stagnant. Can you explain that? The room fell silent again. Vanessa's face flushed red, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. There have been budget constraints, she stammered. Interesting, Sullivan replied, his tone making it clear he found it anything but. Because in that same period, your department hired 4 new senior strategists at salary levels well above Mr. Thompson's current compensation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All these years, I had blamed myself for not being good enough. not speaking up enough, not being present enough. I had internalized every criticism, every dismissal, every time I was passed over. But now, in front of everyone who had ever underestimated me, the truth was being laid bare. "Sir," Derek chimed in, clearly trying to salvage the situation, "we were actually planning to recognize Nathan's contributions today. In fact, part of my presentation acknowledges his input on the strategy he created entirely by himself." Sullivan interrupted, his voice sharp. "The one you're presenting as your own work? That contribution?" Derek's face drained of color. He looked down at his presentation folder, the one containing all my research, my analysis, my recommendations, and slowly closed it. Sullivan turned to me, his expression softening slightly. "Nathan, I'd like you to tell everyone about your strategic implementation plan. Not the version that's been watered down or appropriated, your original vision." For a moment, I couldn't speak. After years of being silenced, of watching others take credit for my work, of being told to wait my turn, I was suddenly being handed the floor by the CEO himself. It felt surreal, like I might wake up at my desk, drool on my keyboard, clipboard still in hand. But this was real. This was happening. I cleared my throat and stepped forward. "The plan centers around a 3-tiered approach to client acquisition," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "Instead of our current scattershot method, we'd focus on creating industry-specific value propositions." As I spoke, I watched the faces around me transform. Confusion gave way to interest. Skepticism melted into consideration. Even some of the board members were nodding along, jotting down notes. For 15 minutes, I outlined my strategy, answering questions confidently, elaborating on implementation timelines and expected outcomes. It was everything I had dreamed of doing for years, being heard, being valued, contributing at the level I knew I was capable of. When I finished, there was a moment of silence, then something I never expected. Applause. Actual applause, led by James Sullivan himself. "That, ladies and gentlemen," Sullivan said when the clapping subsided, "is the kind of innovative thinking that will propel Horizon Innovations into the future." He turned to address the entire room. "I've spent my first 3 weeks as CEO reviewing not just our numbers, but our culture. And what I've found is troubling. We have pockets of excellence being stifled by management that values politics over performance, loyalty over innovation, and maintaining the status quo over growth." Vanessa's face had gone from red to ashen. She looked like she might be sick. "Effective immediately," Sullivan continued. "I'm implementing some structural changes." My heart skipped a beat. Was this really happening? Nathan Thompson will no longer be reporting to Vanessa Reynolds. Instead, Vanessa will be reporting to Nathan, who is being promoted to Director of Strategic Initiatives. The room erupted in surprised whispers. I stood frozen, unable to process what I just heard. Director of Strategic Initiatives. Me? Furthermore, Sullivan added, raising his voice above the murmurs, Nathan will be leading a complete audit of credit attribution across all departments. I want to know if there are other talented individuals being overlooked or others taking credit for work they didn't do. Derek looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Vanessa sat rigid in her chair, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. And me? For the first time in 5 years, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Pride. Not just in my work, but in myself. For persevering, for continuing to give my best even when it seemed no one was watching. Because someone had been watching, after all. As the meeting shifted to other topics, Sullivan leaned over and whispered, "We'll discuss your new salary and team after the meeting. For now, I think you've earned a seat at this table." He gestured to an empty chair near the head of the table, a seat typically reserved for senior leadership. As I sat down, I caught Ellie from HR giving me a thumbs up from across the room, her smile wide and genuine. But this moment of triumph was just the beginning. What would happen next would test not just my abilities, but the kind of leader and person I truly was. The meeting concluded with handshakes and congratulations, most of them directed at me. It was surreal watching executives who had previously walked past my desk without a glance now approach me with business cards and invitations to lunch. "Nathan, if you have a moment," Sullivan said as the room emptied, "let's discuss your transition." We moved to his office, a space I'd never been invited into before. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across his minimalist desk. "I meant what I said in there," Sullivan began, gesturing for me to sit. "Your work is exceptional, but that's not the only reason I'm promoting you." I sat up straighter, curious. "Sir? I've been watching how people interact here. Who takes credit, who gives it, who lifts others up, who pushes them down." His eyes were piercing. "Character reveals itself in small moments, Nathan. Like when someone is assigned to check names off a list instead of presenting their own work." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a compensation package that made my eyes widen. A salary nearly triple what I was currently making. "This company needs leadership that values substance over showmanship. You start tomorrow." Walking back to my cubicle felt like floating. Nothing looked the same. Not the hallways I'd walked 1,000 times. Not the break room where I'd eaten countless lonely lunches. Not even my cramped desk with its familiar clutter. As I began gathering my personal items, a shadow fell across my desk. Vanessa. Her smile was tight, her eyes calculating. "Nathan, what a pleasant surprise," she said, voice honey-sweet but eyes cold as ice. "You've been holding out on us." "No, Vanessa. I've been right here. You just weren't looking." Her smile faltered. "Let's be practical. You may have impressed Sullivan, but you have no management experience. My team won't respect you. I can help with the transition, but I'll need certain assurances about my position." The old Nathan would have capitulated, eager to avoid conflict. But that Nathan had been left outside the conference room doors. "There's a department-wide meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m., I replied calmly. "We'll discuss the new structure then." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't make an enemy of me, Nathan. I've been here longer than you. I know where all the bodies are buried." "That's exactly the problem, Vanessa. You've been focused on burying bodies instead of building something meaningful." She stalked away without another word. I knew the battle was just beginning. As I packed the last of my things, Ellie from HR appeared with a key card. "Your new office is ready," she said with a genuine smile. "Corner suite on 14. The executive floor, where I'd only delivered presentations and coffee, never to stay." "Thanks, Ellie, for everything. You were always kind to me." "Some of us saw your potential, Nathan. We just weren't in positions to do anything about it." As the elevator ascended, my phone buzzed with messages. Colleagues suddenly remembering my existence, Derek attempting damage control, and one from a number I didn't recognize. "Don't let the power change who you are. The company needs your compassion as much as your brilliance." J.S. James Sullivan, the man who had changed everything. I stepped into my new office, spacious, bright, with views that took my breath away. On the desk was a small gift box with a card. "From one invisible person to another. Your first executive decision is who to lift up next. Choose wisely." Inside was a name tag identical to the one I'd worn while checking guests into the meeting. But this one was blank. I stood at the window watching the city below, thinking about all the other Nathans out there. Talented, dedicated people being overlooked. Their potential squandered by leaders too insecure to nurture talent that might one day outshine them. Tomorrow would bring challenges. A team suspicious of their new leader. A former boss plotting my downfall. Executives watching my every move for signs of weakness. But for the first time in 5 years, I felt ready. Not just to prove myself, but to create a culture where no one had to. The blank name tag sat on my desk, a reminder of my first and most important decision as a leader. Who would I lift up? Who would I champion? Who would I see when everyone else looked past them? As the sun set over the city, casting my new office in golden light, I knew exactly where to start. I arrived at the office at 7 a.m., 2 hours before the department meeting. The building was quiet, the executive floor eerily still. My new office, my office, still felt like someone else's space I was borrowing. The nameplate on the door read, "Nathan Thompson, Director of Strategic Initiatives. I ran my fingers over the engraved letters, half expecting them to smudge away. Inside, I placed the blank name tag in my desk drawer. Today wasn't about who I would choose to lift up. Today was about establishing the foundation for a new kind of leadership. I spent the first hour reviewing personnel files, getting to know the team not as co-workers I'd been invisible to, but as people I was now responsible for. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their aspirations. One file stood out. Emma Chen, a strategic analyst who had joined 6 months ago. Her ideas were innovative, her assessments razor sharp, yet her projects were consistently reassigned to more senior team members. In her last performance review, Vanessa had noted, "Shows promise, but lacks confidence, not ready for client-facing roles." I recognized the pattern immediately. Emma was me, 6 months ago. At 8:30, I headed to the conference room to prepare. On my way, I passed my old cubicle, already emptied, as if my 5 years there had been erased overnight. Derek was at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in urgent whispers. He looked up as I passed, his conversation halting mid-sentence. "Nathan, I wanted to congratulate you again," he stammered, hanging up without saying goodbye to whoever was on the other end. "Thanks, Derek. I'm looking forward to working with you in this new capacity." I kept my tone neutral, professional. "About yesterday, I want to explain." I raised a hand to stop him. "We'll have plenty of time to discuss everything. The meeting's in 30 minutes. His face fell slightly. "Right, of course. I'll be there." The conference room filled gradually. First came the eager ones, junior analysts curious about the sudden leadership change. Then the neutral parties, those who had neither helped nor hindered me. Finally, the reluctant ones, Vanessa and her inner circle, including Derek, arriving exactly at 9 a.m., taking seats at the far end of the table. Vanessa's smile was glacial as she surveyed the room. She dressed for battle in a crisp black suit, her posture radiating defiance. Several team members looked to her before taking their seats, a silent acknowledgement of where their loyalties lay. I remained standing at the head of the table, feeling every eye on me. The room quieted, expectation hanging heavy in the air. "Good morning, everyone. As you know, there have been some changes to our team structure," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I want to start by acknowledging something important. This transition might feel sudden and disruptive for many of you." A few surprised glances were exchanged. They'd been expecting a victory speech, perhaps, or a show of newfound authority. "I've been in this department for 5 years, but many of you barely know me. That's partly my fault. I could have been more assertive, more visible. But it's also a symptom of a culture we need to change." I looked directly at Vanessa as I continued. "A culture where some voices are amplified, while others are silenced. Where credit is based on rank rather than contribution. Where fear stifles innovation." Murmurs rippled through the room. Vanessa's smile had vanished, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Starting today, we're implementing a new approach. First, all project teams will be restructured based on skill alignment rather than seniority. Second, every team member will present their own work. No more having others take credit for your ideas." Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "And third," I said, "we're instituting an open-door policy. Any idea, any concern, any innovation, you bring it directly to me. No filters, no gatekeepers." Emma Chen, sitting halfway down the table, was watching me intently, a cautious hope in her eyes. "Now, I'd like to introduce our first project under this new structure." I distributed folders to everyone at the table. "This is the strategic implementation plan that Mr. Sullivan mentioned yesterday. Some of you have seen versions of it. Today, we're going to rebuild it together, incorporating everyone's expertise." I turned to Emma. "Ms. Chen, based on your analysis of emerging markets, I'd like you to lead the international expansion component." Her eyes widened. "Me? Your market penetration models were impressive. I think you're exactly the right person for this." Vanessa couldn't contain herself any longer. "Nathan, while this is all very inspiring," she said, each word dripping with condescension, Some of us have concerns about your experience managing client relationships. Perhaps we should discuss a more gradual transition of responsibilities. This was it, the moment of truth. Would I falter under her challenge, revert to the accommodating Nathan of yesterday? Or would I stand my ground? I met her gaze evenly. Vanessa, your experience is valuable, which is why you'll be heading our client retention team. But let me be clear, this isn't a gradual transition. The changes start today. I turned back to address the entire room. I know what it's like to be overlooked, to have your potential dismissed, to watch others rise while you remain stuck. That ends now, not just for me, but for everyone in this department. The energy in the room had shifted. Even some of Vanessa's allies were listening with newfound interest. We have 1 month to implement the first phase of this plan. It will require longer hours, more collaboration, and stepping outside comfort zones. If anyone feels they can't commit to this new direction, my door is open to discuss other options within the company. Vanessa and Derek exchanged glances. The threat was clear but professional. Get on board or get out. Let's take 15 minutes to review the materials, then reconvene to assign the remaining roles. Emma, could you stay behind for a moment? As the room emptied, Emma approached cautiously. You wanted to see me? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the blank name tag. Do you know what this is? She looked confused. A name tag? Yesterday I was standing outside that door, checking names off a list. Nobody saw me, not really, but I saw everything, including how your market analysis was presented by Derek last month with his name on it. Her face registered shock, then recognition. How did you know? Because the same thing happened to me. Many times. I handed her the name tag. This is yours now. I don't understand. When you see someone being overlooked, write their name on this tag. Bring them to me, no matter who they are, what department they're in, or who's standing in their way. She took the tag, understanding dawning in her eyes. Is that what Mr. Sullivan did for you? I nodded. Someone finally saw me. Now it's our job to see others. As Emma left, I turned to the window, watching the morning sunlight illuminate the city below. Yesterday, I had been invisible. Today, I was seen. Tomorrow, I would ensure others were seen too. The real power wasn't in the promotion, the office, or the title. It was in breaking the cycle, in being the leader I had always needed when I was standing outside the door with a clipboard in my hand. 3 months later, the quarterly review meeting arrived again. This time, I wasn't standing outside with a clipboard. I was leading the presentation. As you can see from these projections, I said, gesturing to the screen behind me, the first phase of our strategic implementation plan has exceeded expectations by 22%. Market penetration in emerging sectors is up, client retention has stabilized at 94%, and our team efficiency metrics show improvement across all departments. The boardroom, the same one where my life had changed a season ago, was filled with approving nods and impressed murmurs. James Sullivan sat at the far end, watching with quiet satisfaction. But numbers only tell part of the story, I continued, clicking to the next slide. The real success has been in our cultural transformation. The screen displayed before and after employee engagement scores, showing dramatic improvement. By implementing our visibility initiative, we've created pathways for talent at all levels to be recognized and developed. Employee satisfaction is up 47%, and voluntary turnover has decreased by 31%. What I didn't show on the slides were the difficult weeks that had followed my promotion, the subtle resistance from Vanessa and her allies, the whispers that I was Sullivan's pet project, the mistakes I'd made while learning to lead, the times I'd been too harsh or not firm enough, the night I almost called Sullivan to say I wasn't cut out for this after all. But I also didn't mention the triumphs that wouldn't fit neatly into a PowerPoint. Emma Chen's face when her market expansion strategy was approved unanimously. The junior analyst who stopped me in the hallway to say, "This is the first time I've felt heard since I started here." The day Derek finally came to my office, closed the door, and offered a genuine apology, and how we were now working together effectively. His presentation skills complementing my strategic vision. And I certainly didn't mention Vanessa's resignation 2 weeks ago, after her repeated attempts to undermine the new direction had finally crossed a line. That had been the hardest test of my leadership, addressing the behavior while remaining professional, offering her the chance to adapt or move on. She'd chosen the latter, and though part of me had felt vindicated, a larger part had simply felt relief that the department could now fully heal. Before I conclude, I said, turning to face the executives directly, I'd like to introduce someone. I gestured toward the door, where a young man in a slightly too large suit waited nervously. This is Tyler Jackson from our mailroom. Tyler, please join us. Tyler walked in, eyes wide as he took in the room full of executives. 3 months ago, I would have recognized that look anywhere. The mixture of intimidation and unworthiness I had felt every time I entered this room. Tyler has been with Horizon for 2 years, I explained. Last month, he approached Emma Chen with an idea for streamlining our internal communications process. Emma brought him to me, and what Tyler showed us was remarkable. A complete workflow redesign that could save each employee an average of 40 minutes per day. Tyler stood straighter as I spoke, his nervousness giving way to something else, pride. Tyler didn't have a business degree. He didn't have a fancy title. What he had was insight, because he saw how information actually moved through our company from a perspective none of us had considered. I nodded to Tyler, who stepped forward to distribute folders to the executives. Inside you'll find Tyler's proposal, along with implementation timelines and cost analyses prepared by our team. But more importantly, you'll find our recommendation. Tyler should be moved from the mailroom to our new operational efficiency task force, with a compensation adjustment to reflect his contributions. Sullivan's smile widened as he opened his folder. Others around the table looked surprised, but intrigued. This is what the Visibility Initiative is about, I continued. Finding talent wherever it exists in our organization. Breaking down the artificial barriers between important and unimportant roles. Recognizing that innovation can come from anywhere. The mailroom, the reception desk, or yes, even the person checking names off a list at the door. Several executives shifted uncomfortably, perhaps remembering how they had breezed past me that day 3 months ago. Questions? I asked. The chief financial officer raised her hand. This all sounds admirable, Nathan. But what's the cost of this initiative? Promoting mailroom clerks and creating new positions doesn't come cheap. Before I could answer, Sullivan spoke up. Helen, what's the cost of not doing it? How many Tyler Jacksons have we lost over the years because we didn't bother to look? How many million-dollar ideas have walked out our door because we were too busy looking up to notice who was standing right beside us? The CFO nodded slowly, conceding the point. As the meeting concluded and executives filed out, many stopping to congratulate me or to introduce themselves to Tyler, Sullivan remained behind. Well done, he said simply when we were alone. Thank you for taking a chance on me, I replied. I know it was a risk. Sullivan shook his head. The riskiest move in business isn't taking a chance on unproven talent. It's continuing to invest in proven mediocrity. He gestured toward the door Tyler had exited through. That young man will remember this day for the rest of his career. And somewhere in this building, there's another invisible person watching what you just did, thinking maybe, just maybe, they could be next. I thought of Emma Chen, who had gone from overlooked analyst to rising star. Of the blank name tag, which had now been passed to 4 different people within the company. Of the chain reaction of recognition that was spreading through Horizon Innovations. That's the thing about visibility, I said. Once you've experienced it yourself, you can't help but want to give it to others. Sullivan clapped me on the shoulder. And that, Nathan, is why you're standing on this side of the door now. As we walked out together, I glanced at the spot where I had stood 3 months ago, clipboard in hand. The memory felt distant now, like something from another life. In a way, it was. 1 year to the day after James Sullivan had changed my life, I stood in the lobby of Horizon Innovations, watching employees stream through the revolving doors. Each face told a story. Some I now knew well, others still strangers to me. But none of them were invisible anymore, at least not in the way I had been. The company had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. The strategic implementation plan had exceeded projections by 41%. Our market share had grown. Competitors were scrambling to figure out our secret. But the real change wasn't in the numbers. It was in the culture, in the energy that now pulsed through the building. "Reminiscing?" asked a familiar voice. I turned to find Sullivan beside me, hands in his pockets, observing the morning rush alongside me. "Just thinking about how much has changed," I replied. "A year ago today, I was standing outside that conference room with a clipboard, checking names." He nodded. "And now people are lining up to get into your meetings." It was true. The weekly innovation forums I'd started had become so popular, we'd had to move them to the largest conference room, with video links to our satellite offices. Everyone from senior VPs to maintenance staff attended, each with equal opportunity to present ideas. "I received the board's decision this morning," Sullivan said, his tone casual but his eyes watchful. My heart rate quickened. The board had been deliberating for weeks on the new executive structure, including my proposed elevation to Chief Innovation Officer, a position that had never existed at Horizon before. And I tried to keep my voice steady. "It was unanimous," Sullivan said, breaking into a smile. "Congratulations, Mr. CIO." Relief and pride washed over me. "Thank you, James, for everything. You earned it. Though I do have one concern." "What's that?" "Your office. As CIO, you'll need to move to the executive floor." "I'm already on the executive floor." Sullivan shook his head. "The real executive floor, the 30th. The 30th floor. The legendary upper echelon of Horizon Innovations, where the C-suite executives worked behind frosted glass doors, where decisions that affected thousands of employees were made daily, where, a year ago, I couldn't even have gotten past the security desk. "There's just one problem," I said. "My door." Sullivan raised an eyebrow. "Your door? It's always open. That's kind of my thing now. The 30th floor is all about closed doors and privacy glass." He laughed. "I think we can make an exception for the CIO who increased productivity by creating the most transparent leadership structure in the company's history." As we walked toward the elevators, I spotted Emma across the lobby. In just 1 year, she had risen from overlooked analyst to head of international strategy, the youngest person ever to hold the position. She was deep in conversation with Tyler Jackson, now Director of Operational Efficiency, whose mailroom-inspired communications overhaul had saved the company millions. "Your protégés are doing well," Sullivan observed. "They're not my protégés. They're my reminders." "Of what?" "Of what happens when someone finally sees you." The elevator arrived, but before stepping in, I paused. "Actually, can you give me a minute? There's something I need to do." Sullivan nodded, holding the door. "Take your time. The 30th floor has waited this long for you. It can wait a few minutes more." I walked back across the lobby to where a young woman sat at the reception desk. Her name tag read, Sofia Martinez. I'd noticed her before. Always arrived early, stayed late, handled difficult visitors with grace, but I'd never really spoken to her. "Good morning, Sofia," I said, stopping at her desk. She looked up, surprised that an executive knew her name. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. Can I help you with something?" "Actually, I was wondering if you could help me understand something. I've noticed you're always here before anyone else, and you seem to know everything that happens in this building." Her surprise turned to wariness. "I'm just doing my job, sir." "That's just it. I don't think 'just' applies to any job here." I leaned against her desk, lowering my voice. "The truth is, I've been watching how you handle difficult situations, how you remember everyone's name, their preferences, their patterns. That's not just anything. That's intelligence and insight." Her wariness gave way to cautious interest. "Thank you. I'm starting a new initiative as part of my transition to CIO. We're calling it Frontline Insights. Well, the idea is simple. The people who greet our visitors, answer our phones, maintain our building, they see things the rest of us miss. I need someone to lead it. Someone who understands both sides of the desk, so to speak." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "And you think I could—" I handed her my business card, my new one, with Chief Innovation Officer embossed beneath my name. "My calendar is open tomorrow at 10. Bring your ideas for how this initiative should work. As I walked back to the elevator where Sullivan waited, I felt Sophia's eyes following me. I knew that look. The mix of disbelief and possibility that comes when someone truly sees you for the first time. "Everything okay?" Sullivan asked as the elevator doors closed. "Everything's perfect," I replied. As we ascended toward the 30th floor, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From invisible to indispensable. From overlooked to elevated. From the man checking names at the door to the man whose name everyone now knew. But the most important transformation wasn't my title or office or salary. It was my vision. My ability to see others the way Sullivan had seen me. To recognize potential hiding in plain sight. To understand that true leadership isn't about standing at the front of the room. It's about bringing others forward to stand beside you. The elevator doors opened onto the 30th floor, revealing a corridor of power I had once only dreamed of entering. Sullivan gestured for me to step out first. "Welcome to your new home, Nathan." As I stepped onto the gleaming floor, I caught my reflection in the polished doors. Not the reflection of the hesitant, invisible man I had been, but of the leader I had become. The leader who remembered what it felt like to be unseen, and who had vowed never to let another person feel that way again. In my pocket was a blank name tag, the latest in a succession that had been passed from person to person throughout the company. Tomorrow, I would give it to Sophia. She would give it to someone else, and the chain of visibility would continue, stretching far beyond what I could see from even the 30th floor. "Ready?" Sullivan asked. I smiled, thinking of the clipboard, the conference room door, the moment everything changed. I've been ready for 5 years. I was just waiting for someone to notice. As we walked down the corridor toward my new office, employees stepped out to greet us. But this time, they didn't look through me or past me. They looked at me, with respect, with admiration, with recognition. And I looked back, making sure they knew, "I see you, every single one of you." Because in the end, that's what we all want. Not just success or power or wealth, but the simple human dignity of being seen for who we truly are and what we're truly capable of becoming. A year ago, I was assigned to receive the guests. Today, I've become the kind of leader who ensures no one is ever just the person at the door, because sometimes that person might just be your next CIO. They just need someone to see them first.
If this story touched your heart and made you think, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that miracles can happen when we least expect them. What do you think about what happened to our protagonist? Leave us a comment below telling us if you've ever experienced a similar situation or what you thought of this incredible story. Your support helps us continue bringing these stories that remind us that life can always surprise us. See you in the next video.